So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this overview and scrutiny committee, the one in which we will be setting the agenda for the coming year. This meeting has been held in accordance with recent government regulations on holding virtual meetings. So please bear with us if we run into any technical problems. Basically, we've all been asked to stay at home, and so we're doing this meeting on Microsoft Teams, and everyone, members of the public, are welcome to join and listen to the meeting as it's been streamed live. And I would like to welcome anyone, members of the public who have come to the committee for the first time. I think it would be appropriate now for us to start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think you're still on mute, Chair.
Chair, we can't hear you. You're still mute. Please unmute.
Very sorry about that.
Right.
I'm just going to say a few words and then I'm going to introduce Sue Harris, the Executive Director for Environment and Communities, and Sarah Newman, who are going to give us an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, which we still all face. So I would ask members of the committees to switch their microphones and their cameras off and to only switch them on when they speak and to switch them then off again. If a councillor wishes to speak and hasn't been called by me, please put a Q in the chat column or raise a hand or just speak up and let me know they want to speak. And I would ask you not to use the chat column unless just if you want to ask a question, because otherwise it gets confusing and everyone can see what's being written there. And also, before councillors speak, please could you state your name, same for officers, so that everybody knows who is speaking. If for any reason your connection drops, and if for any reason my connection drops, I will hand over to Adrian Burrell-Cox, who is the Vice Chair of this committee. So if I now call Sue Harris and Sarah Newman to give us an update about the COVID pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rossi. A number of you will have listened to Barry and other officers presenting the update on COVID-19 yesterday evening. I don't intend to repeat all of that detail, but just to explain a little bit around service impact ahead of you then looking at your work programme for this year. So from March, when the pandemic pandemic first struck, we have been in response mode for RBKC along, obviously, across nationally or local authorities. And when the rates reduced and we got to the summer and August, we turned our minds to recovery and had some plans that I know some members were involved in discussions and beginning to develop plans around recovery. Those are still being worked on, but because of the announcements that we had from the Prime Minister on Tuesday evening, and because of some of the changes that we are now having to make to our services, we're almost taking a few steps backwards from recovery back into response mode. And what that means is a number of our teams, we are gearing them up ready to respond to any second wave, and that in some cases means redeployment from current service provision. There's no suggestion at the moment that we'll end up in full lockdown, but what it does mean is that we are running services in parallel to dealing with a second wave of this pandemic. And myself and Sarah Newman are supporting Barry, who sends his apologies, in the role as COVID Gold. I just want to reassure you that we have a very good framework that we're working to in response. And I'm going to hand over now to Sarah Newman, Borough Executive Director for Children's Services, just to talk a little bit about those work streams and the preparations that we already have in place.
Thank you, Sue. Quick changeover. Yes, so we've got a robust process in place for outbreak control. So we have 3 groups looking at care homes, looking at schools, and then managing any outbreaks in our offices. And we've also put a mobile testing unit at Moulton Road in order to promote testing and tracing locally. You'll recall that we did start to see the infection rate increase in Kensington and Chelsea, but we know now nationally testing hasn't been operating at the capacity required, and whilst that capacity is improved, we're now looking at, public health colleagues are looking at the pattern of the outbreak from the north of England and using local indicators such as calls to 111 and calls into primary healthcare settings, which are showing a rise. So we know that the numbers of the infection rate is higher than the reported level. And of course, we've had the advice now in relation to office working that it's to come in only if the role or the task requires it. And of course, we're keen to ensure that our staff can attend for well-being reasons, because clearly our offices are considered COVID secure. The real underlying message, both locally and nationally, is the desire to keep our schools open. And of course, there'll be a number of tasks that we'll be keen to ensure we can deliver to keep all of our residents safe. So as we build up our response, we are ensuring that we've got adequate supplies of the personal protective equipment that our staff may need if the outbreak, if the infection rate rises, and we need to take further measures locally to keep everyone safe. So that's probably enough. I'll pause there to see if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Mason.
Yeah, you may have covered this last night. I was at another meeting, in fact, before the council meeting. With regard to children and school children, what is the policy with regard to them wearing face masks, especially in the public areas, streets and whatever, or on public transport. Overwhelmingly, they do not wear face masks either in the street or on public transport when we have to. What is the policy with regard to them? And if they're supposed to wear them or not, are we telling them in the schools that they should be wearing them? What's the situation? Thank you.
Okay, that's a really good question. And the public health advice has been that young children do not need to wear masks, and that masks aren't necessary to be worn in schools. However, some of our secondary schools and our colleges have made the requirement for children to wear masks in the corridors as they're moving around between classrooms. So public health are saying that it's not a necessary measure, but some schools have said that that some schools are requiring it as an extra safety measure in the environment they have. Now, generally, that's been where the buildings that they're operating don't offer the level of space for optimum distancing.
Thank you. Councillor Ali.
Chairman, the question was about children travelling in the public area, in the streets, parks, buses, tubes. Do we have any control or advice for them when they travel outside of the school? I'm really talking about outside of the school. They're travelling with us. They're travelling with senior members and elderly people and perhaps people with vulnerabilities. Is there any remit for the schools or any remit legally, governmental wise, for them to wear masks as we have to protect our people, or elderly people, and so on?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is an age requirement on masks, but I'll just double check that with public health colleagues and send a written response around in relation to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ali.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would like to first of all to thank our officers who've been working very, very tough time during the COVID-19, and now we are facing the second wave. And as we can see, and I would like to everyone in the borough to thank them, as well as the councillors. And I hope that we recognise for the good work that they have been doing. Having said that, I would like to ask you the question about testing, mobile testing. We know COVID-19 has hit hard the BAME communities, and the north of the borough is where most of the BAME communities are, and where and I'm elected as the councillor for Delgado Ward. I would like to know what's the reason behind that the mobile testing hasn't been done, or mostly not been concentrated in the north of the borough where the BAME communities are. Is there any way, what is the policy behind that most of the mobile testing has been in the south and the central of the borough rather than the north of the borough? And we know the BAME community are the ones the most affected. And for that reason, I'm surprised when I saw the numbers. The 5 northern wards were the least, I would say, COVID-19, which is a welcome, but I suspect that not enough testing has been done, and that's why they're the bottom. Although I wish that would be the case, that they are the least. So please tell me, is there anything, is there a plan that we will have a mobile testing in the north of the borough? Thank you.
So Moulton Road has been identified as the site for the mobile testing, which is in the north of the borough. It's been really dependent on a number of criteria for which sites can be utilised for the purposes of mobile testing, and a number of sites were put forward and then reviewed by the team in order to determine which one could fulfil the function optimally, and Moulton Road meets the requirements, which is why the mobile testing unit has been set up there.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Evans.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Sue, you've done an excellent job, and we're very grateful at the council, and my residents are very grateful for your and your team's work. I just like to know the process, since I am chair of Family Services Select Committee. Could you talk us through how the community, the parents, etc., are communicated to? In other words, there is a basic policy now with the schools, and we all want to keep them open. If there are changes, how do you communicate to the parents and to the families? Have you had to do that at all since the school has opened with the change of policy? And what happens with families where the parents don't speak English? How does that work so that everyone is knowledgeable about what's going on?
Great questions, Councillor Evans. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when we saw the rates, the infection rates start to rise in Kensington and Chelsea, we actually wrote out to all of our schools to inform them, and we know that schools are keeping in regular contact with all their parents. We are monitoring attendance at schools, and where attendance is below 85%, which I'm happy to say it's not in Kensington and Chelsea, but if a school dips below 85% attendance, we are wrapping support around the school through our education support service and our early help service in order to make sure that we can provide support to any vulnerable family who might need it. Now, schools are making sure that they can translate any information that parents need, and we've got our family hubs supporting schools with that as they need to. So we're making sure that all through the communication with schools, we're making sure that they're communicating the right things to parents, and where they need additional support to do so, we're providing that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I've got one question for Sarah Newman as we've got her on, and then a more general one. It was very good to hear that all the schools are above 85% attendance at the moment. But is there a range within that? Are there some nearly 100% and some scraping the 85%? And is there any kind of difference between the types of school, any trends that you can see or geographical trends in terms of the attendance? Sorry, Councillor Hammond, that's a great question. Attendance at secondary school is slightly higher than attendance at primary school. I think the average at secondary schools is 92% this week, with 87% at primary schools. And yes, there are some variations within that. So we are monitoring it on a daily basis. We're monitoring the outbreaks in schools on a daily basis. Clearly, now there hasn't been so far in Kensington and Chelsea, but if there is an outbreak and a class has to go home to isolate, or a year group has to go home to self-isolate, that is going to affect the attendance figures. But to date, so far, all's been well. Well, let's hope it remains so. And of course, presumably, I know that attendance will not be 100% in a non-pandemic time, but what does this compare with? What's the normal attendance? 98, 99? Yes, absolutely. And say nationally, we're just slightly above the national trend in terms of attendance during these times. Thank you.
Councillor Lindsay, you wish to ask a question? Councillor Lindsay.
I am. Thank you, Chairman. Sarah, Ofsted, do you know when the next Ofsted reports are going to start in place, given that until a week ago we thought things were easing, now there's a greater degree of fluidity and uncertainty?
Yes, so Ofsted have currently indicated they're doing assurance visits to local authorities looking at their social care provision, and they're doing assurance visits to local authorities looking at their special educational needs and disabilities offer. Those visits won't produce judgments and are designed to support local authorities to support those local authorities who might be struggling. But the HMI probation are still doing the youth offending inspections, and we have been notified that we will be having one of those. We're expecting inspectors to be remotely with us on the 19th of October for a week.
Okay, I think
Thank you.
Councillor Mason, you wish to ask a further question. Councillor Mason, I have your hand up. Maybe it's from before. Okay, I also saw Councillor Addenbrook. Do you wish to ask a question?
No, I was just going to say something but it's fine. It's all been covered. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for coming to the meeting and for giving us this update.
Thank you.
So moving on, I'm going to, there are no apologies for absence, and I believe all members of the committee are present, but I'm going to call out your names individually and ask you if you have any declarations of interest. Thank you. Councillor Kazim Ali.
Yes, Madam Chair. Present. No interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Beryl-Cox.
Present and with no declaration of interest.
Councillor Max Chowan.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Marwan El Nagi.
Present, Madam Chair, and no declaration of interest.
Councillor Janet Evans.
Present, Madam Chair, and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Greg Hammond.
Here, Madam Chairman, and nothing to declare.
Councillor David Lindsay.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Pat Mason.
Present and no declaration of interest, Chair.
Councillor Will Pascal.
Present and no declaration of interest. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I confer that I have no declarations of interest to make. So we move on to the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 1st of June. You have all seen the minutes. Do you agree that they can be signed as a correct record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Agreed. So now we move to the substantive part of the agenda, which is the annual scrutiny work programme, and I will ask Jackie Hurd, the scrutiny manager, to introduce the report, and then I will make some comments before moving on to the next part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'll just say a couple of things. So the report sets out the criteria for developing a good work programme. So that's about prioritising so scrutiny can make an impact and add value, having a balance between pre-decision scrutiny, looking at decisions before they're made, and policy development, and having a spread of items over the year, but also leaving enough capacity if things come up during the year that scrutiny can look at, which is very relevant to what Sue Harris said earlier about the situation that we're in with COVID that could change things. And also it's about capacity. So obviously scrutiny's greatest resource is you as councillors, so it's making sure that you've got the capacity to deliver the work programme. So the report goes on to describe how we put the work programme together, all of the organisations, councillors that were contacted. Appendix 1 sets out how scrutiny works at the council. Last year when the committee met, it was agreed there'd be a kind of assessment or stock take of how scrutiny was working. That got delayed because of COVID, but that will happen this year before Christmas. Just an evaluation of how members think it's working. Thank you.
mute myself. Thank you, Mrs. Hurd. So, yes, so a very important thing, the annual Scrutiny work programme, and I want to just say a few words before we get into discussing the work programme for the individual select committees. I think it's was really good to have Sue Harris and Sarah Newman to introduce an update about COVID, because we are all basically still working in that environment. We don't know, the future is uncertain. We can't be sure where we're going to go. And last year, some of the programme that we set out had to be paused because of COVID. It limits what we can do in terms of having a public meeting to discuss things, and or going out into the community to talk to people about various policies and issues that might be important to them. So when we're kind of framing our work programme, we have to bear in mind that we don't quite know to what extent we are going to be restricted. And we have to be aware of that, of the impact it's having on the council, on the delivery of our services, and on our staff, who are all working extremely hard. I was just going to say something else about, I know some people don't really think that the council should scrutinise itself, but it is, so I was kind of thinking about why do we have it that way? And it basically, it comes from statute from the 2000 Local Government Act, whereby a cabinet system was set up, and it was felt that a scrutiny system had to run as well at the same time as a check and balance on executive power. So we have to remember that our foremost duty is to basically hold the executive to account, but also scrutiny can provide an opportunity for backbench councillors to help with the development of policy, and so that we can deliver better services to our residents. It's also a way of amplifying the voices of our residents, which is why in preparing this programme, we have a consultation with them, because the topics have to be relevant to them. And I would just say one further thing about capacity. We all, we all do other things, and we have 3 excellent scrutiny members of staff, but we have to accept that we cannot do everything. Therefore, we have to prioritise, and we have to focus on what we can do, so that we can actually have some impact on what we have been studying and gathering evidence about. So so I'm just checking to see if there's anything I have left out. Yes, in the notes you will see in the papers are set out the ways in which scrutiny went out to the community in order to ask people for their suggestions. Grenfell is still the #1 priority of this council, and therefore Grenfell will feature in the work programme of all of the committees. I've already said something about COVID. And as you all know, you all attended a workshop in which the committees came together. Backbenchers were all invited, whether they were on scrutiny or not, to look at the ideas that have been put forward and to discuss their various merits. Okay, so I have a few questions that I'm going to read out, which help us when we're trying to focus on what is the important thing for us to scrutinise. So #1 is does this issue affect a significant number of borough residents? i.e., does it go over more than one ward? We have to ask ourselves if the issue is strategic and significant. We have to ask if it is of concern to stakeholders and external partners. And also whether there are significant variations in outcomes between the wards themselves. And finally, as I've said before, we have to ask ourselves, is the scrutiny we are undertaking, can we have some kind of impact that will help the lives of our residents? So firstly, I'm going to turn to the Adult Social Care and Health Select Committee. I'm going to go to all of the committees in turn and ask the chairs to introduce what they have been discussing with their committee members about their work programme for next year. And then after Councillor El-Naghi has had a few minutes to discuss where he wishes to take his committee, we will then have questions from the committee, and after that we will have questions from other councillors who might happen to be in the room. So I am calling first on Councillor Marwan El-Naghi. Marwan?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to highlight and share with the Overview Select Committee what we've been discussing after the workshop. Now I had the time to consider all the suggestions for the Adult and Social Care and Health Select Committee work program, which made by residents, my fellow committee members, and by other colleague backbenchers for their helpful conversation and frank discussion, which at the workshop happened last week. So after careful consideration in taking the council policy priorities into account and the health emergency context, which informing these priorities that will have great impacts on the work on the select committee, which is we are going to consider. And at the same time, we are considering very carefully the time frame upon which we are starting the program rather late. So it's going to finish in May. And as you highlighted, Madam Chair, that the capacity available to us sorry, it's really should be a pre-existing to our commitments. So therefore, there is a need for to achieve a balance in focusing at some pressing issues regarding other social care and health committee and the issues being raised in the borough. As Suhar just highlighted, on the 3 groups being set up, and one looking carefully at care homes, that's it's quite interesting subject would be being highlighted. That's amongst the priority to be considered. And as you just mentioned, that's the overall council priority regarding Grenfell recovery and the impact COVID having on us. And as the which is the whole council, we are working in this uncertain and very strict. To be honest, a scary environment, but it's manageable if we're managing the COVID in terms of basic, simple hygiene. However, capacity and the time scale has to be really paramount importance. So I will look at 4 priorities which we considered. One is COVID-19, which is on both health and other social care impact in recovery. And this will be discussed fully in October meeting, where we are going to receive the updates only from West London CCG and from the lead member, hopefully, Councillor Edinburgh. On the second one, we are focusing on primary care provisions, and these are including the changes in access to primary care and urgent care as suggested by our partners in Health Watch, and network development as put forward by our health partner. So this is will be addressed fully in October, where we are defining the scope and we decide on the best way to carry it forward in the time scale we have. And one is the third one, which we will be focusing on, is the mental health in North Kensington, where residents and communities being affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy from the last 3 years have been suffering really from mental health issues, and COVID has another dimension added regarding people losing jobs. And as a councillor for Notting Dale Ward, which is I've seen firsthand how my community being affected by this tragedy, and this issue is very, very close to my heart. It's always a matter on which we have strong support from the Health Watch in reviewing as they experience on the ground, which they have really documented research on the backs up of these relevant issues to our community. Not forgetting that the recent publication of Professor Appleby report on suicide prevention following the Grenfell Tower tragedy, which is commissioned by the Central and Northwest London CNWL NHS Trust. As part of this review on mental health, we'll be looking at the council's role in any partnership work with CNWL. The report commissioner that they may result from Professor Appleby's recommendations will be again looking at the scope and the manner in which this review will go ahead, which will be deciding upon with my other colleagues in October meeting. And of course, I mean, there are the health and well-being strategy formulated for North Kensington, which is part of North Kensington recovery by West London CCG. And finally, as a statutory requirement, the safeguarding of vulnerable adults in the borough by reviewing the safeguarding, which is the Adult Executive Board Annual Report 2019-2020. This is a long-standing commitment for our select committee, since the review of governance intended to ensure that the voice of the most vulnerable residents is heard. So the proposal focuses on key strategic areas for the council and the select committee. It addresses key concern for our residents, and this will allow us to actively listen to the most vulnerable residents in our borough. Of course, this proposal doesn't reflect fully the work program, but we prefer to have less rather than more. And as we progress with because COVID-19, it seems like it's here to stay for a foreseeable future. We have to live and work with it. So we'll be scrutinizing health partners via participation in the Northwest London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, abbreviated JOSC, and we have invited recently, as you've seen in the last night council meeting, how Royal Brompton Hospital and Harfield Foundation Trust is very close. That it's unanimous to address this issue at the next select committee in November, so giving them time to explain to our committee members the rationale for the proposed merger and its impact on services and what's happening in the borough. And finally, Madam Chair, we may have further responsibility in scrutinizing any possible substantiation of service change that's proposed by the Royal Brompton and Harfield Foundation Trust in our borough. And it's my intention to set up just two working groups, one looking at the medium term and the other one for the full term, joining with other committee where we find a common ground to work. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Enagi. Does anyone wish to ask a question about any of that going forward? Councillor Pascal.
Can I please, quick question?
Okay, Councillor Lindsay and then Councillor Pascal.
Marwan, Jackie had talked a moment ago about capacity.
Yes.
You talked at quite length what you wanted to do, and I just wonder how much thought you'd given to the capacity that you as a committee and also the officers will have to do all that you suggested you wanted to do, because it's quite a lot.
This is what come if you see. Thank you, Councillor Lindsay, for this question. It's not really a lot in terms of 4 main issues we are going to tackle. We'll focus on the 2 main priorities, and then the other 2 are statutory. So of course. When it comes in October meeting to finalize the main work program, this is what's summarized from a very long list in the previous program of topics, if you've seen it. So this, as I said, this is not the final, and we have to take 2 issues here into consideration: the work of officers, which I'm working very closely with them, and the other thing is the COVID. So yes, I agree with you. That's I don't want to what's to say. The work is going to be finalized in October. So, but these are only suggestions now. So when we are putting the time scale in the capacity build-up, this is not the full program.
Okay,
yet.
thanks, Marwan. I would say that the statutory things that you have to do, on the other topics, you can look at them again and decide which, and perhaps put 1 or 2 on a reserve list if you think that you can't, cover them adequately. And I would suggest you talk with the scrutiny officers on scoping exactly what you're going to do, and so you have a clearer idea when we come to the next meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. And that's the intention of setting the 2 working groups.
Okay. Well, Councillor Pascal, did you wish to say something?
Please, Madam Chair, if I may. My question, I think I'm directing this question to the right place, because I think adult social care goes with public health. My question is really to do around improving resilience in this time of COVID, particularly in the areas of immunization for children, flu jabs for adults, and dental care for both, because these all are things that, if they're not up to date, will make the population more vulnerable to not only more but worse illness under the COVID. Sorry if this wasn't clear. The question was, will you be addressing this, Councillor and Lagi, and your...
I think, can I bring in Councillor Chow now? Max, you'd have something to say on this.
Max, yes?
Yes,
thank Max.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Pascal's comments just now. I think at the workshop we did talk about immunisation and vaccination, which I think is very pertinent and relevant going forwards, and I think we should look at that when we discuss this at our next meeting.
Yeah, because I mean things progressing very steadily, Madam Chair, and as you can see, like the immunization program at Oxford, I think has been paused at the moment.
Sorry, there's a misunderstanding here. I'm not talking about vaccination for COVID and the development of a vaccine. I'm talking about immunizations to do with children. Are they up to date, all the MMR and such like? Do they get dental care, and have they got access to dentists? And are the adults being flu vaccinated? There's a shortage at the moment, and only over certain ages available, or vulnerable people. And the question is, are you scrutinizing the availability and effectiveness of these programs so that the population is prepared in the maximum way to take on board the viral load of COVID as it develops?
I mean, this is something we are happy to consider and taking the advice since it is in the our Councillor Chouhan domain. Do you want to have any further comments here, Max?
Yes.
I think can I just say something first?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Councillor Lindsay has pointed out that Marwan has quite a long list, and now Councillor Pascal is adding to it. So I would invite you to say what you would like to about immunisation, but you know, we also at the end of the day we have to have regard to the capacity of the officers and the councillors who are you know, going to undertake this work.
Madam Chairman, my suggestion would be that there should not be a committee working group on this, but it would seem to me that it would be useful to the committee to ask the agencies that provide the immunisations and the officers in the council who monitor this across our cohort of residents and children and elderly people and vulnerable people, that there should be some knowledge. This data is being collected nationally and locally. The question is, are we on top of it as a council? Are we knowledgeable about it? And are we flagging it if something needs to be done? I'm not talking about a lot of work to be done by the Scrutiny Committee. It's a question to be asked for a safeguarding point of view for the population.
Yeah, we can do that, Madam Chair, I think.
Okay, Max, would you like to add something?
No, I just wanted to I just wanted to echo what Councillor Pascal was saying, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor, I'm just going to recap now what I have written down that you would want to look at. So, you're very concerned about the impact of COVID-19, and you wish to look at mental health in North Kensington, particularly about suicides. You have a statutory requirement to look at the change in service proposed by the merger of the Brompton with Guy's and Thomas's, and then also I have down that perhaps you would have a report on immunisation in the borough. Has that captured all of the things you've talked about? Now, obviously, yeah, Grenfell is linked in very much to the mental health aspect of North Kensington.
That's exactly. No, I think this is a good summary, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'm sure, I don't know, do you work with Paula or Ryan or Jackie?
Yeah, Paula. I work with Paula and
so
Gareth.
I think going forward, that Paula will help scope you out, and then you have to decide which topics actually require the working groups and which one you're going to start straight away.
Yeah, we're having that meeting next week, Madam Chair. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Chouhan.
I just want a final comment about the scrutiny topic suggestions. We also discussed the working group that was put on hold, and that was on complaints. I think we should look at that again as well. Marwan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working very closely on this one with Paula and looking at the previous program. But it's yeah, we'll open for that discussion on complaint.
Okay, thank you very much, Marwan. So
Thank
we'll
you, Madam Chair.
I had a question.
Sorry, Councillor Evans.
Yes. I was going to say it might be helpful, Marwan, because your topics are very important. And what I found, because I also have a big responsibility, is that to be flexible in terms of the way you do it. And a suggestion might be to do a single issue meeting if that happens, and where you can cover or put a bunch of different issues that are COVID related or whatever together and deal with it, because you have a very comprehensive package there, and it might be easier, as you mentioned yourself, to decide what's important in terms of working groups, or just having your members send you questions and you send them to the lead member. It'll be very efficient and move it. And then if you need, you can have a single issue meeting, which I think, which I know we're going to do this year. And I think it would be very helpful, because the situation that we are presented with is very fluid. There's a new issue every day, a new policy, a new outbreak. And I think we all on the committee are intelligent enough to know that we have to be flexible this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Flexibility is a key here, Janet. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Marwan. So we move on now to the Environment Select Committee, which covers in its terms of reference many topics and services that are concerned to our residents. They happen to be the very visible issues like, bins being emptied, enforcement, air quality and planning services. So we have to prioritise the work of this committee so that it achieves a balance between scrutinising the council's services and developing new policies, particularly around topics connected to the borough as a place where we all live and thrive. So I'm going to ask Councillor Will Pascal to introduce the work programme for his committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tom, could you put the slide up, please? Thank you. I'm sorry, I will reduce this to 3 out of there. So you will recall, everybody, that Ryan, who's been helping me from governance, and thank you very much for all the work from Ryan. And we distilled the long list that was put together in earlier meetings and shown in earlier meetings into 7 structured headings, and also then down into 3 major themes. And it's those themes that I want to outline the areas that we're going to focus on in terms of our working this year. The first one is how we've taken the from the top left of that screen, Environment 2030-2040 carbon neutral commitment by the council, you recall, in January. We're going to focus on the 2030 commitment, because that is the area across the council's work where the council has the control of what's happening. The 2040 commitment is to do with achieving carbon neutrality across the borough as a whole, which we have limited control and influence, and have to work with central government and the instruments that they bring in parallel to things that we as the council do, plus the involvement of our residents and businesses and visitors. So 2030 carbon zero commitment, what the council can do, how its policies link into achievable action over the next 9 years, because that was a 10-year commitment and we've already a year into it. Within the financial regime, which is tight, requiring cross-cutting work by the leadership team and the executive management team under Barry Quirk, also with partner organisations through procurement, resident engagement, is an issue that affects all of our population, residents, businesses and visitors. And remember, even in this time of COVID, that during the day, the population changes considerably by those who come into the borough. Much less than before COVID, but still quite a lot. We have already prompted some major change on how this is addressed by the Environment Sustainability Strategic Board, particularly in the areas of putting in numerate, timed and smart targets. Now, the background to this is that we have had for many years an air quality and climate change plan, which has been largely qualitative, but with some areas of work which has been focused on, particularly to do with the council's own transport and such like. The whole area of its buildings, and particularly housing, has only been brought into the plan recently. This is an area of work that can be started now by the Environment Select Committee Working Group, with the aim of an interim report in the spring, in the early spring. So that would be our first area of work. The second area, Madam Chairman, you've confirmed the need for Grenfell-related scrutiny, and that you have confirmed that the soil testing by government and others will be received and reviewed by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee under your chairmanship. Qasim Ali from the Housing and Communities Select Committee and I have discussed joint working on what we have termed healthy homes, that you'll see is under the Grenfell Tower there on the second thing down. And that by that, he will be looking in his committee on areas that he will describe in some more detail. But broadly speaking, they are the needs and allocations and social aspects of housing, and the overall provision. And what we will be looking at is in the environmental improvement, the upgrading of these homes, and also best practice with new homes that have been currently being commissioned. Some of the best work on this by the leadership team and officers is in the refurbishment of Lancaster West, which is already starting, which has had a very heavy involvement and very welcome involvement from the local community. It's looking at the best technology that's available and will be an exemplar from within the Grenfell recovery area for the rest of the whole of the borough's social housing stock. From this, many lessons will be learned about how to deliver practical policy across the whole of RBKC, and also within tight housing revenue account budgets. This area is ready for joint working group with a report at the end of our year, i.e. towards May next year. But there is excellent work that is already being done by Doug Golding's team and with Tim Keller-Smith on new housing commissioning, and also, as I say, within the area of the Lancaster West estate refurbishment. Interestingly, in the south, in the Sutton estate, Clarion are commissioning some housing association work on refurbishing some buildings there, and they, from a technical point of view, are addressing many of the same areas. So it's going to be interesting to see how the different sectors come up with solutions that can be used as exemplars across our roughly 9,000 to 10,000 social housing stock, which has got to be done over the next 9 years now under the 2030 commitment. The third stream of what we've termed managing the street and joining up environment customer service has been making big progress over the last couple of years. We've reorganised 5 directorates under Executive Director Sue Harris. We've had the development of the CREST scheme for site and street management. Wardens have been introduced, although they're currently being repurposed largely for COVID enablement, measures enablement, and also parallel progress with recent leadership paper on improving customer services. There's much good practice and intent in the environment sector, and high resident demand, continuously high resident demand in the requests for help from individual councillors, but still a long way to go. And there's even within the officer corps some cultural resistance in relation to joining up different dots or silos of service to offer a more generally resident facing service. Much of this reflects individual items in the Environmental Select Committee's long list, but it's a work in progress. I'm proud to setting up a working group later in the autumn. So we have not scoped and timed that yet, but that's the 3 major items that we wish to look at. There is a 4th one which has come up recently, which we don't know yet how to handle. It's a bit of a shock, the change in the proposed planning regime from a national level. And we are going to, as a first step in the next meeting in 2 weeks' time, to ask officers to give us an in-depth appraisal of what this will mean to the borough from outside, how well prepared we are in terms of our response and lobbying in terms of the white paper response consultation, but also to look at the suggestion of the Kensington Society, how well integrated our various the tools in our planning tool, workshop are to reflect a coherent response to planning in the future. And then in addition to that, we have a long list of individual items which we get as regular reports to individual meetings, and sometimes circulate things in between. We might circulate a request for comment on a key decision. We might pull in the Greening and Brompton SPDs, waste control contract, culture plan, local broadband and electricity infrastructure, high streets, etc., which we think come best in terms of lead member reports and officer reports circulated prior to committee and questions at committee, rather than long debates or working groups or such matter. So that's the sort of methodology and approach with the three major titles that we wish to take forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Will. Does anyone have a question for Councillor Pascal? I'm going to take questions from the committee first, if that's okay. So, and then other councillors. So, Councillor Hammond.
Thanks very much. And I don't know if this is going to turn into a question or not, but I was just going to observe that Will's very welcome extra work, the fourth one on the planning white paper, I think demonstrates that all of us, all of the committees are going to need some flexibility in every year, and to leave some spare capacity, because there'll be something from field left, I suspect, for all of us. And this one is a very big one for the borough that landed over the summer, and it's really good that Will's managed to find some time in the programme to fit that into what is already a very packed but coherent agenda that he's pulled out there. I don't think there is a question there, but I wanted to say that.
Thank you. Councillor Mason. Councillor Mason? You have your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was speaking with my mic muted.
Okay.
Councillor Pascal, of course, the Council's carbon neutral commitment and the climate change action plan that you're presumably talking about, that's one of the biggies, obviously, one of the big commitments. But I sat on about 5 different processes in the last 22 years on environment, and I found that what normally happened was that each committee would take the plan of the previous committee and spruce it up and present it. And in many occasions they said the last action plan did not do the job, but the new action plan looked exactly like the old action plan. And it's good that we're going to be looking out to the borough, because before it was only the council. What is going to be your the approach, do you think, of the committee in really producing a climate emergency action plan that really does the job? Because quite often we just flunk it. We don't do it. It's all tinkering about at the edges. How are you going to approach this? Is it going to be about really changing residents' attitudes and the borough's geography, even streets, to limit traffic? What is going to be your approach? Will it be
Sorry, would you like me to reply to that now? Yeah, I'm very happy to. The answer to that was in the well, it was a bit of an acronym, the SMART targets. The thing that has been lacking, as you say, because I've been working on you know, as a backbench councillor before I joined the leadership team and so on for many years. I think you and I probably both were working on this at the same time. And the thing that has always frustrated me is that in the past that we have not had a numerate plan with any time bar to it in terms of what success looks like, by when, how much you have to do each year to achieve your target, We now, for the first time, as a result of the motion that went in January 2020, we have a target, a real hard target. It's carbon neutrality for all the borough's own operations by 2030. That is 9 years away out of a 10-year programme that was committed to roughly this time last year by the leadership or the lead member, and then went through the motion in the January. So we have, for instance, when I went to the first board earlier in the year and looked at the plan, I said, where is the housing? Because the housing is, the council's social housing is 4/5 of the job that the council has to do in terms of carbon neutrality. Where is it? So we've got that on the plan now. We've got some numbers being produced in terms of how many you have to do every year. It's not quite as simple as saying divide 10,000 by 10 years and that means 1,000 a year. But you then have to look at what is practicable in terms of things that you can do. And as I said, some of the work that's already been done in the Lanc West Estate plan is really exemplary and up to national standards and above in terms of forward looking as to how things can be done in social housing with a high concentration on of involvement of the local population in that project. And that's what we've been scrutinising, because that's what's been presented to us by officers. We'll be looking at the numbers, we'll be looking at the structure, the Gantt chart programme, milestones, etc. And we'll be also looking at how involved the local community is in that, both collectively and individually, because it's how you or I run our own particular homes that has probably the biggest effect on the whole thing. In terms of more detailed things, the fleet for transporting officers around the borough has more or less already been done. The procurement for the waste contract, which is currently going through decision making, incorporates electric vehicles and its projections. And so there's a whole series of things that are happening. The other thing that's different is that the beginnings of the Environmental Sustainability Strategic Board is, which I recommend you look in on, because it's a public meeting. I think when that happens, you can have a view into that. The thing about that is that it has representatives from every single department of the council, from finance, procurement, adult social care, FCS, and all the other various different departments. So I believe that as long as we keep that council commitment, which, if you like, you were part of, we were all part of, it is the highest authority in the council, well above the leadership and or the EMT and Barry Quirk. The council controls, in a commitment like that, what we have to do. We have a commitment and we have to scrutinise that we stick to it. We reverse engineer it from year 10 back to now, and then we ask for a forward plan with milestones and KPIs and all the rest of it as to how we go forward. So that's the difference as to how we're going to do it this time.
Okay, we'll see what happens.
See what happens. Does any other member of the committee have a question for Councillor Pascal? No? Okay, so I'll ask Councillor Taylor-Smith would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. In fact, actually, it's a supplemental to the point I think that's raised by Councillor Mason and has been answered by Councillor Pascal. And I'm really pleased, obviously, in terms of within my area of the council, that there's cooperation between Kasim Ali and Will on looking at this important issue of greening our stock. I think I just wanted to make two quick points. One is, when it comes to looking at the silos, there's a third silo that also just needs to be considered, and that's our operational buildings, which come under FM. And that obviously there is a commitment there that we need to look at those in terms of greening. And I think, as you rightly point out, Will, is that our housing stock is actually only 5% of the housing that's in the borough. So we'll be doing our bit in terms of carbon neutral, and that obviously raises and highlights the importance of taking a view and encouraging all owners of property within the borough, to follow our lead. Thank you.
Kim, if I can respond to that, thank you for pointing at the operating buildings. I totally agree with that. It's not only the town hall and our depots and so on, but obviously schools, maintain schools and so on. And I'm looking forward to working with Qasim Ali on this. And the reason we're focusing on the 5% of the housing is because it's the 2030 commitment first, because within the encouragement from the chairman and from Jackie Hurd, Scrutiny Manager, we're trying to do a small practical, well, it's actually quite a large step, but we're trying to do a step first that is related to what the council can do and how we can influence policy as a scrutiny committee. I totally agree with you that it's a much bigger target to go to the 2041 across the whole borough. But I think we'll be looking at where, at every step, where the work for 2030 can inform the aspiration for 2040. But I think it will be, in realistic terms, that will be a study. The 2040 study will be one for a committee after this year. I don't think we'll keep it within the scope here in overall terms.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Councillor Pascal? Okay, well, I'm just going to summarise to make sure I've got everything down right. The first area of interest for you is looking at the 2030 carbon neutral commitment by the council and how we're working towards it. Yeah. Yep. As a broad heading. Yep. The second one is looking with Qasim Ali, the housing committee at Healthy Homes, which is particularly looking at the Lancaster West refurbishment, which is using the best tech and all the rest of it. The third one I'm less clear on, so it's about street management, customer service, wardens. I haven't got that one completely in my head as to what you want to do on the third one.
Okay, well, I think to be fair, that's probably because I'm not quite as clear either, and I certainly haven't put it as well as the other ones. But broadly speaking, it's trying to get the provision of services in every aspect of what you see when you go out of your front door, from the planning, the street cleaning, the antisocial behaviour, etc. The actual working together, and then how the customer, the resident, makes a complaint or a comment or raises an issue, and how that's answered. Because there are lots of bits around, but they're not as coherent as they could be. They're more coherent than they used to be. Sue Harris's team, with the 5 directorates she now has under her executive directorship, has done an amazing job in putting together CREST and a whole number of things, including wardens and so on. But there's still a long way to go. And it is still not linked up in practical terms, in real terms, as far as individual residents are concerned, with customer services. Customer services is going through a revolution as well, but it's that journey which we're part way along that we need to hold the leadership and the MT to account, and to keep that progress going and to make as much progress as fast as possible. I don't underestimate the difficulties, but the goal of having an integrated service without the S's at the end, a service to residents who, as customers, ask the question to the council once, rather than having to find out where they need to ask the question. It sounds a simple ask, but it's very difficult. Okay, thanks. And I've got as your fourth item is basically looking at the government white paper on planning and the implications it has for the borough. That is at the moment a subject heading which we are asking officers to scope for us as to whether this is something we should be getting involved in. If, for instance, at worst look, the worst fear would be that basically the government's taking away all the powers of planning, then there probably is very little for us to scrutinise. If, on the other hand, looking at it more practically, there are, haven't read the documents in detail, but I understand that there are areas to do with us retaining some powers to do conservation areas, with quality of design, but there are whole lots of areas, like, for instance, how we control construction sites, and we put a lot of effort over the last 5 to 10 years in that. And if that's all being washed away, we need to make sure that we're lobbying hard for getting it back, because there's been chaos which has been brought largely under control to do with sites. And there's a lot of sites now working in best national practice. and it'd be a real shame if we went backwards. But it is up to us to listen to officers for the next 2 weeks before we decide whether they're going to get involved in scrutinising it in detail.
Okay, thank you, Will. So moving on now to the Family Services Select Committee. This committee is responsible for services for some of the most vulnerable residents in the borough, and I will invite, especially has been very seriously impacted by COVID, and I invite Councillor Janet Evans to speak and let us know what she's thinking of looking at this year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We've had an excellent workshop last week, and I thank the officers for organizing it, because we've had a chance to put together, bring together the fellow committee members, other backbenchers, and of course, our valued residents. I've had time to consider fully the thoughtful suggestions for the Family Services Select Committee, and the work program. We had some excellent suggestions by the residents and by fellow councillors. And we've had some very helpful conversations in the workshop last week. And I thank everyone for their participation. I mean, two matters have weighed particularly on my mind when preparing my topic proposal. One is the council's policy priorities and the health emergency context, which informs these priorities and which has a bearing in all of our work. Number two, the time we have to carry out our work, which should be finished in May 2020, our capacity and our pre-existing commitments. Hence, my clear priorities of the Family Services Select Committee work program for this year are COVID-19 recovery and Grenfell recovery. The topics I would like to propose for my Select Committee's work program are as follows. 1, COVID-19 impact and recovery in schools. Looking at the educational challenges that pupils and families are facing during this emergency and the Council's response to it. This topic will be scrutinized at our October meeting with lead member Josh Rendell's report and a question and answer session. I welcome your contributions to this. Number 2 is serious youth violence in light of COVID-19 impact and recovery, a subject that is always on our mind and in the news. This is a topic that my committee members were concerned about already last year. The health emergency has added further concerns, and it has renewed our interest. My Select Committee will be receiving a briefing on this topic ahead of our meeting in October, when we will discuss how to review it. And this will also be very data oriented. We will look at the statistics that are coming in from the lead member and his officers. Number 3, Grenfell recovery, looking at the implementation of the Grenfell Education Fund. We will like to review the Council's initiatives, intervention, and support to help and to monitor the attainment and progress of the pupils affected by the Grenfell tragedy. Number 4, the safeguarding of children in the borough. This is a standing commitment on the part of our members. Since the governance review, to ensure we looked after the well-being of the most vulnerable children in our communities. In addition, we will be monitoring the lead member response to the recommendations made by our Scrutiny Committee on school exclusions, which was led by Greg Hammond, and the childcare needs of the communities affected by the Grenfell tragedy, which was presented by Hamish Adorian. This will take place at our October meeting. We will also monitor the implementation of the recommendations accepted and will schedule committee time for this in due time. It has been difficult to choose among the many important topics suggested. As you can imagine, they are numerous. These would keep us busy for a very long time to come. Yet I believe that my proposal focuses on the key strategic and significant areas it reflects, and it reflects the grave national and local policy context we are living in, which is most unusual. It addresses key concerns of our families and children throughout the borough, and it responds to essential duties of scrutiny. It also allows the Scrutiny Committee some flexibility and capacity to respond to emergent situations, which since the health pandemic has become more necessary than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Evans? Councillor Mason.
It sounds like a good program. You mentioned serious youth violence, and of course you're right. It's an ongoing, it's an ever with us issue. I'd be interested to know what how you're going to approach this, because of course there's a vast amount of data on this already. We've got our own community safety team. We've got what the police are doing, and I found I was once chair of the environment the environmental the committee that acted as the council's crime and disorder committee, and we were fond of saying that we were quite often talking to ourselves, because we would get officers in, we had the police in, and so on, and they would give us all the statistics. But at some point I said, actually, we need to listen to the people who are actually either who are these young people or are close to them, who can actually tell us what's going on inside their minds and their groups. Because we didn't know, we were effectively talking to ourselves. So I'm wondering how you are going to approach this, because the police told us recently, I think it was either the OSC, this OSC, or another meeting I was in, that because of COVID-19 and the unemployment, or the fact that more and more young people are unemployed, I think was in their words, the gangs in London that are dealing and doing the drug houses and exporting drugs out to the shires, they're inflated. There's large numbers of them now, because that's where they see themselves getting some recompense, some money. So and they don't listen to us. They don't listen to the police. They don't listen to your committee, my committee. They don't read anything that we put out there. And they are the ones who are fighting amongst themselves and shooting and stabbing each other, etc. If you've been into this, you'll know. So I'll be interested to know what approach, if you've thought about an approach, you would take to this, given that it's meant to mean some kind of change somewhere in what's happening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. That's very helpful. Well, we started it last year, and we didn't get around to finishing the working group. So we do have some information, but I think after, as you quite rightly mentioned, that after this situation with COVID and with lockdown and rising unemployment, we have to look at it again, and we have to look at it in the present context. So first of all, we do have to examine the data, because we have to see the present situation where we are with this. I would like to do it as a single issue meeting, because it is so important. And then we were thinking of having a roundtable discussion online, of course, where we will involve the community, which is very important. We will involve the officers, we will involve the police, and but this will be after we get the statistics, because I believe we have to start from facts, and we will be getting those as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pascal has a question. Will?
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just clicking my machine. The point I want to do is to emphasise or support something that Pat raised there. As the Chairman of Governors of a primary school in the borough, one of the things that's really frightened me over the last few years is that whereas when I started, there was some discussion amongst the leadership team there and some of the specialist teachers about which children from the final year in the primary school that they ought to warn secondary schools might be vulnerable to being groomed for county lines gangs and such like. And that now the discussion is which children in the primary school are actually being groomed. If not active, at least they're being groomed. So this has moved younger by about 2 or 3 years over about a 4 or 5 year period. And that is really, really frightening. And it's jumped the gap from secondary back to primary school. So in your youth violence work, it would be good to find out how much evidence there is in terms of that. I just have anecdotal evidence. I don't have full evidence, but it's something I would urge you to look at.
I thank you for that. And as a member of the committee and as a member of the public, I would ask you to send me your queries, because the point is we are scrutinizing and looking to make suggestions to the lead member. So we have to examine, we're not making policy. And I think very often people on scrutiny mix that up. I would like to have your questions and Pat Mason's questions in writing so we can ask those questions of the officers, because that's very important. We need a place to start with this. So I think both of you are very valuable, and I would appreciate getting an email from both of you so it gives us a basis to work from.
Thank you.
So does anyone else wish to ask a question of Councillor Evans? I've got Councillor Pascal again. Councillor Addenbrook. Councillor Addenbrook.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I actually had my hand up earlier when it was you were talking about immunisations, but actually as it affects children's services as well. I just wanted to, increasing uptake of immunisations is a priority for Councillor Rendell and myself. So we had asked the NHS to come to the Health and Wellbeing Board in October, but unfortunately they're unable to come then because of increased workload, but they are coming in November to present to us. So we could share the paper with Family and Children's Services or with Overview and Scrutiny and Adult Social Care, whichever is, you prefer, but just to let you know that we could do that.
I would really appreciate that, Sarah, because the questions are vast this year and we have to focus, and that would be really helpful. And I'd also ask that Marwan, Councillor Al-Nagi, will share the mental health issues and the effect on the Grenfell community, because we would like, we had wanted to focus on that, but I was told since he is doing it, it'd be very productive that he shares that information, and I would appreciate you sharing that information. It makes it much more practical and effective for Scrutiny to operate that way, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Mason, do you wish to ask another question?
I wanted to say, Councillor Evans said, of course, we're doing scrutiny, not policy making. The thing I always asked was, we are expending large amounts of money on everything youth, whether it's youth violence or anything else. So it's not a case of making policy. I always asked, we are spending X money, here is the policy and the outcome that's expected from that, yet we have X problem. Why have we got X problem when we have a policy already? So we are going to be, we would ask you to scrutinise the already set policy with the spend against it, and we would not be making policy, of course. I always found that we were quite often talking to ourselves. That was the whole problem, that the system, the officers system, or just like civil service and government, they all sat around the table and decided why or what the policy was or whether it was working or not, but nobody on the outside who was actually going to be either enacting it, or the young people in this case on the street, they never saw the policy. They didn't care about the policy. They just would receive the outcome if there was an outcome. So I found 7 times out of 10 that the people that I was scrutinising with a policy who were spending the money really didn't have an idea, or much of an idea, how to actually make the policy into an outcome. And that's really what we have to do when we're doing scrutiny. So we would not be asking you to make policy, but to ask the people who are meant to be carrying out the policy, for which the public are putting in inordinate amounts of money, what they're actually doing to actually make it work on the coalface. And you may be surprised that a lot of them are not able to do it for whatever reason. And it's our fault and Scrutiny's fault, but people are losing out on the ground, and the problem, we wonder why the problem is getting worse or not better. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I thank you for that, Councillor Mason. And you say that you are always speaking among yourselves. So what I'd like you to do is speak to me and speak to my committee, please, because we have opened it up to residents and to other councillors who aren't on our committee. I'm sure it'll be very valuable, and then we can formulate the questions to go back to the lead member for. But I really need specifics from you, and I'd really value your input. So thank you so much.
We'll come back.
Okay, thank you, Janet. So if there are no more questions, I'll just summarise what I've got here of the areas you wish to look at. Number one, COVID-19, the impact and the recovery in terms of schools.
Yes.
Number two is serious youth violence, looking again at how it's got worse during COVID-19, which you're going to have a single issue meeting.
Yes.
You're going to look at Grenfell recovery and particularly the Grenfell Education Fund. And number four, I've got a safeguarding of children in the borough. And I believe you're also going to have a meeting in October to look at the response of the lead member to the exclusions, the school exclusions report, and also Hamish's report.
Yes, and I'd like to invite Councillors Pascal and Mason to come to our single issue meeting, because I think they'll have a very good input for the committee. So thank you very much for your queries.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair.
So we move on now to the Housing and Communities Select Committee, and I'm going to invite Kazim Ali, who's the chair of the committee, to speak to us.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair, once again, and I would like to tell you about the housing. And first of all, may I give you a background update about Housing and Community Select Committee. As when I was appointed and the team, the committee came together in late May, I have managed to organize a meeting for the Select Committee itself. And I think we were the first team to do that. And I do thank my Select Committee for making the time to meet among us and talk about issues and topics that we want to scrutinize for the year ahead. And followed by that meeting, there was another meeting in July that we've managed to have with the lead members, and both Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith and Councillor Anne Saran. And I thank you for their time again, for coming out and giving us information about their responsibilities and as the lead members, so that we have an opportunity to scrutinize for their work under their leadership. That was followed again in September, the meeting, the workshop that you as the chair MT organized, and it was really a great meeting. So that the workshop allowed us for all the topics and the discussions that we had over the last 3 to 4 months. We managed to put them together, and we came up with a list of topics that we want to scrutinize for the year ahead. But the workshop gave us an opportunity to actually think about 2 or 3 or maybe maximum about 4 to look into it, so that we can propose. So if I just run through with some of the list, although I will summarize the 3 points, the 3 topics that we will go ahead under the working committees. But the topics that we have been looking into since we started the Select Committee include the communities, that's welfare, also Grenfell communities, the Grenfell recovery, engagement with the Grenfell recovery, And also homelessness. We've looked into the homelessness and homelessness strategy, homelessness during the pandemic. We also looked into the housing associations. Some of the councillors were keen to look into the housing associations and what's been happening with the housing associations, including the repairs, the rent, and also we've looked into the housing management. Again, housing management, mainly we talked about the repairs and substandard accommodations and disrepair for the borough. As again, another topic that we have been looking into included the housing safety. Housing safety came up really a lot of times, and we have a lot of discussion about it. Fire and building safety, drug dealing in the borough, as well as antisocial behavior. Housing supply, modular housing and community-led housing came up. However, it did not receive most of the points, so that we will not be taken forward for this year. But I will go through again the summary of the 3 topics that will be going. Illegal subletting also came up, the topic that to be looked into, and residents associations to have a very strong working relationship with the residents associations and the chairs of the residents associations, as well as also we've talked about the social housing, which came out of overcrowding, healthy homes, living conditions of a council-owned properties, and temporary accommodations in borough and out of borough. So those were the topics that we have been looking into. So my committee and I have been also in contact, and we are now thinking of setting up 2 working committees. So the 2 working committees, those are the real areas that we have decided to go for. The first committee will be under the banner of Grenfell and Communities. And Grenfell and Communities Committee will be looking into Grenfell recovery as well as COVID-19 recovery. So that's the first committee. It will be looking into issues that are connected to Grenfell as well as COVID-19 recovery. That we set as a 1 committee. The second committee that we are going for is housing. So the housing committee will be looking into 3 topics, although we haven't scoped about 3 topics. The first one is housing safety. And I said earlier that has received most of the points or most of the votes when we had the meeting of the workshop. And there are councillors who are ready to take on the lead of this, and especially to look into the antisocial behavior, drug dealing, the fire safety, fire doors replacement program, and what's been happening overall, and to make our borough the safest place to work, live, and study in the whole country. So the housing safety is a huge topic that we want to scrutinize for the year ahead. The second point for this housing group will be housing management. So we have combined housing management and social housing, which we look into the same area. So we have come up with the topic of what we call RBKC Healthy Homes. So the topic will be RBKC Health Homes. So we will not call it housing management. It will be RBKC Health Homes. And we will be looking into the RBKC owned properties. And as Kim Taylor-Smith, lead member for housing and Grenfell, said earlier, only 5% of the homes that we have in the borough is council-owned we're going ahead to actually check healthy homes to make sure the homes in the borough are healthy enough, environmental sustainable, but most importantly healthy. And that is the important we're talking about now, because now that the government and the Prime Minister have announced that if you can work from home, we want homes that are fit for human habitation and homes that are fit to be anyone can work from home and to feel good about it and not to cause long-term sickness. That is one thing. RBKC owned properties. Second point will be housing association owned properties. That will also be annual check that we will hopefully work with a selective committee for environment. And the third will be privately owned rent properties. So those will be within the RBKC Healthy Homes. And the final, those are the important things that we will be working on. As I said earlier, this RBKC Healthy Homes working group will not just be a housing and community selective committee, but we will be working, as Councillor Will Pascal mentioned earlier, we had a discussion about the way to work together, and we're planning to meet, hopefully, whether it's face-to-face or via virtual meeting, via Zoom or Teams. We will make sure that we will work together on this and work form a working group that can make our borough the best place to live, work and study. Again, to scope the areas that I've just mentioned, although it will be a councillor-led scrutiny, we will be working with officers, and we have a plan to meet with officers to scope and plan for the projects ahead. We will not be able to do this without the support of officers who have been really very helpful, and I thank them for their time. And this housing and community select committee will be working flexibly. So we are flexible. We will be areas, for example, if we were to call a meeting specifically for repairs, we will have a meeting, scrutiny committee just for repairs, or maybe we'll have a meeting with the lead members and the senior officers for that department. We also plan to work with the housing associations as well as residents associations to make sure that we take their views on board. Overall, we hope to have a conference or a meeting in April or May 2021 to publish our reports, also to give recommendations for the year ahead, if providing that COVID-19 is not still around. So just to sum up with what I have said earlier, the working committee will be the first one, Grenfell and communities. So that will be looking into the Grenfell recovery as well as COVID-19 recovery. The second working group will be looking into the housing safety and RBKC healthy homes. So our housing safety, we've talked about drug issue, antisocial behavior, and everything else that comes up with housing safety. And the final point for this housing select committee will be, or the housing working group, I would say, will be RBKC health homes, and RBKC health homes will be looking into the RBKC owned properties and also housing association owned properties and privately rented properties in the borough. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions coming from.
Zim. We have a question here from Councillor Schmetterling. Dorry?
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was listening to this with interest, but I was a bit concerned to hear that the pursuit of speed up of the housing construction program, potential method of speeding up housing program in the borough, is not considered to be of sufficient priority to take forward, because I thought we had discussed this. Perhaps I misunderstood, so I'm sorry if I misunderstood you there, but I thought we had discussed this, I don't know, a few weeks or 2-3 months ago. And of course, I'm going to present the report on next week, I guess. And there are a number of things that I think you'll see the recommendations and you can decide what to do about it. But I think until we fully understand the position, it should not be neglected, because it is potentially a method for speeding up housing construction. And I have to remind everybody that we have a dramatic shortage of housing of all types, but also of social housing in the borough. I appreciate there are a number of urgent issues to deal with. And I mean, housing safety, for example, is, of course, an important topic. But I just wanted to put that on the table, and maybe we can discuss it at the committee meeting next week.
Thank you, Dorry, for your input and for your question. Indeed, yes, housing, building a new homes in the borough is the priority. But what we have been talking about here is the issue of capacity, and also the issue of how many officers can work on the scrutiny committees. And you, as we've said before, this is not a normal year. Although we will be looking into the housing capacity, modular housing, building housing in the borough, I don't think the numbers of people who've been commenting, and when we had the last meeting, the workshop, the voting that I have here with me, and the number of people who've expressed wants to do the housing, or especially modular housing, were really fewer compared to the Grenfell or housing safety or social housing, so for housing management. For that reason, I'm sure there will be, and when I have looked into your report, and we will be you will be representing your report at the next meeting. And one is that perhaps we can have a specific meeting, or maybe one-off meeting, but because of the resources that we have in the council and offices that can work with us, and unlike any other year, we're dealing with COVID-19, and we don't even know the topics that we have already chosen, if we can cover them all. But I rest assured that we will have a meeting about RBKC homes. But those are the topics that our residents and councillors, and mainly people who want to scrutinize, looked into it. And I think that's the whole point for the workshop. And I do understand, and I thank you again for the time that you have put in last year. And hopefully we're looking forward to your report at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Lindsay had a question.
Yes, thank you, Marie-Therese. Kasim, I commend you for your ambition in terms of what you're doing. I'm just slightly trying to get my head around your capacity and wonder, and I don't want an answer now, but I wonder whether at the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting that we have, whether you could bring a draft pro forma as to what you're planning to do when, because as I said, I am impressed at your ambition, but just want to make sure in my own mind that you are going to be able to achieve it all within the goals and the timescale that you've got. So I don't want an answer now, but that's just my comment.
I just not an answer, but a comment. Thank you again for realizing that this is an ambitious program, and of course we have all been elected to do what we can do for our residents. Having said that, we have my selection committee is really, again, I'd like to thank them for their time. Not only that we had meetings with the workshop, but we had, as I said, June meetings, July meetings on our own to discuss areas that we want to do and to talk about and have a thorough discussion about what we want to scrutinize for the year. Again, this is not going to be only a housing and community selection committee, as Councillor Will Pascal said earlier. We have had discussions about working together in collaboration, so we will be working together. But to answer, although you didn't want an answer, to give you a kind of an early answer to what you expected, we will have a meeting to scope things for the next working group. And once we have meeting with officers and the councillors who want to take the lead, for example, Councillor Hamish Adorian will take the lead on housing associations, and to spend the time and energy to look into the area and the issue and extensively, so that he can actually give us an insight of what's been happening with housing associations. That was his preferred choice when we had the meeting. Again, Councillor, give you another example. Councillor Mo Bakhtiar was keen to take on the housing safety, especially drug dealing behavior and fire and building safety. So we have councillors who wanted to put the time and do the extra mile, go the extra mile rather than waiting just officers to support them. But yes, we will be making use of the officers' time, and I will be able to give the committee some sort of a brief introduction or a plan when we have meeting with the officers first, and then hopefully the way forward will be clear for all of us. But this is just to give you a hint of what's to come and the issues that we have discussed and talked about that we'll be scrutinizing for the year. I hope this gives you a kind of initial answer to the answer that will be coming after we have a meeting with the officers.
Councillor Hammond.
Thanks very much. And I know Kasim and I have already talked about some of these things over the last few weeks, and thanks for the very clear explanation. And I think a lot of us came into this with ideas on housing, but I think well done to you for really promoting the communities side of it and insisting that we have a working group on communities, because I think it's very important not to forget that half of the committee. I think your explanation, Kasim, was very focused on 2 working groups, and I think it would be helpful at this stage to also say if you have any ideas about what you do as a committee, as the whole committee, because obviously we are having full committee meetings during the year as well. And did you have any thoughts about what that you wanted to share at whole committee level as opposed to in working groups?
Thank you, Greg. Again, thank you for your input. As the vice chair for the committee, you have taken also a very good share of what we have a plan, and your input was really appreciated by everyone, including myself. Yes, although we will be giving the task for some of our councillors and our selected committee members, We will have meetings, and yes, we will continue our meetings, and I think we have 4 to 5 meetings for the year ahead, or for the next few months, 8 to 9 months. And for example, if I were to give you an idea of what we plan to do, one whole meeting specifically for repairs, for example, in December meeting, housing management and the repairs. And we may have another meeting, although we may not go into working, let's say, working group, but we may look into the homelessness and ask report or update report from the lead members, and specifically for TA, temporary accommodations in and out of borough. So those type of issues will be outstanding issues for the committee to look into every committee meeting that we do. Okay, subjects will be changing, the agenda will be changing, but those are the meetings that we'll be doing. And as I said, scrutiny, although we want to make it fair and friendly scrutiny, but the point is to scrutinize the lead members and the policy setting, and we will be having an opportunity to look into that. And again, as we've said before, Grenfell will be every meeting that we will have. We had it before. We will continue to do so. So yes, every meeting that we will do will be scrutinizing. We will not just waiting for the select working group just to scrutinize. We will have agendas, whether it's to invite the lead or CEOs of housing associations or the private rent to look into it. We will have meetings, or specifically to look for into the homelessness and the pandemic and COVID-19. There will be plenty of issues to talk about as a select committee, but the areas that I have mentioned is the select committee going further and doing the extra mile.
Councillor Mason, you had a question.
Before I make my point, can I say that I've always believed in ambitious programmes. I remember when I was a scrutiny chair in the days before Grenfell, I was regularly told by senior officers that we didn't have the resources to do the programme that we put together, but actually we did extraordinary things when we didn't listen to them. But I go down the same road, Councillor Ali, as I went down with Councillor Evans. Housing safety, excellent subject, of course, but when you scrutinise the antisocial behaviour and drug dealing, etc. aspects, will you be able to scrutinise the actual systems? Because I perceive from my caseload and my colleagues' caseload that the antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse and drug dealing is increasing, and especially during the COVID months, because there's less officers, less police around, less management, etc. Will you scrutinise the systems? Because a lot of the systems look great on paper, but they don't actually work because officers turn around, there's not enough police, there's no follow-up, the legal process is extraordinarily slow. People can be dead by the time something happens, basically. Can we look at how the systems actually perform in real time, in practice, on the ground, from the people who experience that, rather than just looking at statistics and listening to officers, as good as they may be? We need to know how the system works. Again, the system is either broken, needs to be fixed, or we're spending a lot of money on a system that doesn't work. Can we look at the nuts and bolts of the system and repair if necessary? Well, it will be necessary. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Councillor Mason, for your question. Yes, these are the topics that we have chosen to go forward, and once we got the confirmation of the overview select committee, we will be coming up with more details. But if I give you an initial kind of a view of what we plan to do, yes, we will be setting the scope for this work with officers. We will be looking into the system, not only the system, but we will be looking into what has gone wrong, what's working, what's not working, what can be improved. What is, and the data will be coming from residents. The data will not be officer just giving us their views. The data will be raw data, will be primary data, will be collected from residents, and they are the ones who call the shot. So once we have data from residents, I'm sure the lead members and the whole council will appreciate and will act on it. So I will not be able to tell you now specifically what will come out of data, because we don't know yet. But what I can tell you, once we look into this issue, we will be looking into the whole issue, not just a system itself, but looking into what is working, what is not working, what can we do about it. But again, it will be hopefully Councillor Mo Bakhtiar who will be taking the lead on this, specifically for healthy homes, as he wanted to take the lead on this. Will be working on, and once I know more details about the issues that he wants to look into, and with working with officers, then I will be able to update you and the whole committee on this.
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
Councillor Pascal.
Councillor Ali, I just wanted to support you in your ambitious programme, and to thank you for confirming the objective of working together on the Healthy Homes project. To answer perhaps partly the concern that one or two other councillors have raised, the way that we have looked at some of the subject area in our committee, where in our terms, and I know it's different, we have a sort of 2030 horizon on environment and zero carbon, and a 2040, 30 being internal, 2040 being the whole borough. I think when working on healthy homes, it would be useful to focus first on our own housing stock in the borough, but keep an eye out for good examples of work in housing associations. In other words, good practice. Sorry?
Yeah, carry on, please. I can hear you. Someone else.
Someone interrupted. Don't worry.
Sorry, I thought that was you couldn't hear. Okay, but I think what I'm saying is that whilst I would support working on healthy homes across council houses, housing association and private sector, I think the first port of call and the priority would be our own council stock, because that's the area that we as a scrutiny committee working together, or scrutiny committees working together, or select committee working together, can have the most easily accessible data, easily accessible residents, easily accessible results to look at. And it's also our direct responsibility as a council. But we can collect useful best practice examples from housing associations and from the private sector, and to scope out the scale of work that would be needed outside. So if we have a limitation on our time, that we prioritize those those homes, to put it more personally to people, that we actually have a direct responsibility to as a council, and our lead members and officers have a direct responsibility in terms of policy and executive action. So it's really a question of agreeing the overall scope, but suggesting that perhaps we take things at a stage at a time and see how fast we can progress.
Thank you, Councillor Will Pascal. And I think what you've just mentioned will be taken forward when we have the meeting between our two working committees, and then we can scope out, and with the officers' support, the way forward. However, what the message that the Housing and Community Select Committee is sending is to the privately rented homes in RBKC, to the housing associations' own properties, that we have influence on them, or we can share with them. They will know that this is something the council is now working on. So it will give them an early signal. Even if we start with housing, as you mentioned, it will give an early signal that we are committed to provide homes that are fit for human habitation, homes that are fit for our residents, as we want to be the best place to live, work, and study. So yes, it's technicality. How do we start? And where we will start, I think we will leave it to the officers and the team that are doing the planning. But yes, I'm with you, the direction of travel. And once we kickstart with housing, if we all agree, will be then privately rented homes, and the housing association owned homes will be followed, or maybe we can start at the same time. But that issue, and I agree again, thank you for agreeing and coming on board. It will show that the working selected committees can actually work on an issue that affects both of them, and saving the time for the officers, rather than working two different select committees on a similar issue, working with them with one issue. And I'm sure together we can do, again, this shows the council working together, for regardless of our political colors, but we are here to do for the work for our residents, as they are the ones who sent us to represent them. So thank you again, and I look forward to our meeting sometime in next month.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Ali. It was very, very interesting. I just wanted to say I really like the idea that you're doing a single issue meeting on repairs, because repairs really cover cover many multitudes of sins, as they say. And I would especially urge you to look at the special needs, how people can order their disability, the disabled can order repairs, because when I was on housing, they were initiating a voice-activated program for ordering repairs and online facilities. And I think it's very important to see how this is being offered to the SEND community. Also, it might be interesting in terms of the speed on repairs, as you quite well know, that affects crime, broken windows, broken lifts, broken locks, broken doors, etc. So if you could share that information, it would be really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. And I think, again, it's across the board that we all share with this, whether it's for the children, for adults, for disabled members of our communities, our residents. I think you've raised a very valuable point. And yes, we will be sharing the data once we have our teams on the ground, and providing COVID-19 will not cause destruction and hopefully no further delays. But we will plan to work with officers as well as local communities, RAs, the chairs of RAs, and hopefully get raw data that hasn't been collected before, or at least in significant numbers of data that can actually interpret what the will of our communities, whether they are in the central, south, or north of the borough. Yes, I think that's a valuable point, and we will take it on board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ali. So I'm just going to recap by saying that what you want to do in your select committee, you want two working groups. The first will be on Grenfell and the communities, and it will also look at recovery from Grenfell and from COVID-19. And then you will have another working group which will be on housing, and that will look at housing safety, fire safety, and it also will look at housing management, social housing, healthy homes, and also other things you want to consider. Okay, 1 second. I've got so other things you might want to consider are you're having a single issue on repairs, and then also looking at illegal subletting, drugs, and antisocial behaviour. Councillor Campbell wishes to come in to make a comment. Leader? Councillor Campbell?
Sorry, it took me a bit of time.
Okay.
It took me a bit of time to unmute myself. My only comment, Madam Chairman, was really to say, how impressed I've been by all your committee, that you're really thinking strategically about what you want to do. You appreciate the capacity of the officers, that there's a huge range of things, that everyone's very ambitious. We'll have to see, how that works out. And just to say, from my point of view, as the leader of the council, and I know Kim's on the call too, is to say that, of course, we're more than willing to be scrutinised by you, and we're happy to come and answer any questions you have. And indeed, we hope that the agendas of the scrutiny committees have room for some of the policies which are going through, so that they can be scrutinised and you can have a look at them before they come to leadership team, before we make a decision, so that we feel that we've got your okay, and that you've really thought through all the details, and possibly have comments or things that you wish us to add or wish us to detract, etc., I think that would be very helpful. So I was just going to say thank you very much for having me, as it were, at the back of the room. I look forward to working with you all, and I can pledge that my whole leadership team will be there at scrutiny meetings to answer questions, any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Campbell. That's very kind of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye. Okay, I think I'm going to move on now to the overview and scrutiny, the development of our work programme. So just to go through what we are responsible for in overview and scrutiny, obviously it is the work programme. We have to review the effectiveness of our own work as well. We scrutinise the annual state of the borough, and we have the chief executive and the leader to come before us and we ask questions. We have the statutory duty for crime and disorder. So that again involves having the police to come in and speak to us at a meeting. Grenfell obviously will continue to be part of the programme. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee has overall responsibility for the Grenfell recovery programme, and we will also take up work about soil contamination, which unfortunately got paused this year, I think due to COVID, and I don't know if it's restarted. I have, because all of us are involved in other committees, 4 review chair committees, we have only so many committees a year, and I think that the budget working group is going to be incredibly important this year, both looking at this year's budget and next year's budget, because we don't really know fully now what the impact of COVID is going to be. So I don't think that we can actually set up another working group at the moment. We have to have flexibility because we don't exactly know where we're going. Some dates for the future meetings. The budget working group is going to report to most of our meetings. In November, we will have a report on the Grenfell recovery strategy. In December, we hope that we'll be able to have the leader and chief executive. Again, in January, we'll have the working group, and then we'll look at the work programme, how it's working out. And then we have also the statutory crime and disorder scrutiny. If any of you have any comments, my basic feeling is we have, with COVID and the uncertainty around that, and overall responsibility for Grenfell recovery, bearing in mind we're coming up to the bit of the inquiry where it's going to be looking at the council and the council's response, etc. I don't think we have, and all the other statutory things we have to do, I don't think we can take on another piece of work in overview and scrutiny, but I will let you come forward with your opinions on that, if you will. Anyone?
Yeah, Mary-Therese, can I speak briefly?
Yeah.
Fully accept what you're saying about capacity and the importance of the Budget Scrutiny Committee. I would much appreciate it if we could have for a couple of agenda items in, and it doesn't have to be consecutive meetings, but just looking in detail at how much money is being spent and when on Grenfell and related, how many staff, and how is the output actually being measured. And I think we're all aware that some of the wards in the north, and I include Nottingdale, and my ward that I represent is contiguous to Nottingdale, and I actually live in Nottingdale, is that Nottingdale and some of the others are in the whatever 10% most deprived. that is there a way, and I'm sure there is, and I'm sure that the officers have already done it, but it'd be interesting to hear what they say, of making sure the money that's being spent, Grenfell related, can be used to ensure that future outcomes for the young in particular who are living there are enhanced by that money, notwithstanding the fact that the money's prime purpose is for Grenfell recovery.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Pascal?
Could I support your assessment that there is a lot of work for OSC anyway? The other thing that I think you've pointed out implicitly anyway is that both the inquiry into Grenfell will rightfully raise issues that we'll need to understand analyze in the way that we would need to in OSC. And the other thing is that I think, as people have generally pointed out, and Barry certainly reinforced recently, that we don't know yet what's going to happen with COVID in this second wave, and that the direction of COVID will be dramatically affected whether there is or not a practical vaccination within the next 6 months or so. And therefore, I think reserving some flexibility and capacity for the future is something that I would entirely support you in your chairmanship in.
Thank you. Councillor Evans. Janet.
I'm very happy how this meeting went, and I think there were a lot of valuable contributions, and I think your guidance was excellent. You all have to focus, and that's what good scrutiny is all about, is focusing. Thank you.
I think it's been very good, because I think we've really sort of had a brainstorming session. We've gone through all the committees, we've discussed everything. I think it's been very helpful for Councillor Evans. Yeah.
Agreed.
Me anyway. So does anyone else have any comments generally about the OSC or about maybe not the meeting, because we haven't quite finished, I'm afraid. But if you want to say anything now about the OSC, and then we'll move on to the KDs, the forward plan.
I think it was really good how we engaged last week, and we invited the community. It was very productive. We had our breakout sessions. We got a lot of guidance, and we also had focus, and it was inclusive. To me, that really added a lot to this year's scrutiny.
Thank you very much, Janet.
Could I make a comment there that maybe it comes under the next item, but some guidance from you and maybe Jackie Hurd as to the best way to make input on any KDs that come through, because some of them are very fast and they comment very quickly. But just on some advice on the mechanics of how we should respond to those would be useful.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, I have a problem with the KDs, because if you will see, they all come to the overview and scrutiny committee, and I just don't know enough about all the different areas, and sometimes I don't understand what the KD is about, and you have to wait to get a report. And so the way it's set at the moment is that I, or the OSC, kind of delegates the KDs to everybody, but I've asked for the KDs to be sent also to the chairman of the various, it's usually quite obvious that which select committee it should be. So I don't have to do all of them, because I don't actually feel up to it. But perhaps Jackie could come in there. She has some ideas.
Yeah, so we have made some improvements at your suggestion. So now when the key decisions are put on the forward plan, select committee chairs are notified about that as well. but I've been talking to my colleagues in governance about the presentation of the information, because it is a very long report that you have on your agenda. So I'm talking with my colleagues about if there's anything that we could do to improve it. So Councillor Evans has raised with me and other councillors issues around improving the language. There's a lot of jargon that's used, trying to get things more into plain English to help us all. And I'm going to look with formatting. So I've had one meeting with colleagues in governance this week, and we're just looking at how other councils put together this information to get some ideas, and we'll come back to you with some ideas about how we could improve that.
Thank you.
Jackie, do you suggest we go through them now, and I'll just say the ones I think ought to go to which committee, or?
You can go through them, and I don't know if the scrutiny chairs have also looked at them, or other committee members, and identify either do you want more information, or do you think that you have enough information to say yes, you want to scrutinise them?
I mean, some of these, as you pointed out, are out of date.
They are. I
found when I was doing public realm and I was the scrutiny chair there, that the KDs are always at the end of the meeting, and it's when people want to go home and they don't get focused on. So it might be better to pick out a few really important ones and have them as an agenda item, rather than just sort of flicking through the K decisions at the end and then saying, well, this is really important. Okay, for example, I'll just pick one now on page 9. And I don't know if this is out of date or not, but it's a TfL consultation on the cycleway, Holland Park Avenue, Notting Hill Gate. Now, that was an issue that caused a lot of concern amongst the residents when that was suggested. So I think that's one that should be looked at, but you know, it's Will's committee, so I don't know what Will feels about that. I'm just picking one out for.
Well, I was a little bit confused about this myself, in the sense that, I mean, I know the history because I was lead member when this came up first time around, and it looks as though that what this is a review of what's happened as a result of a community involvement, sort of like a second time round, but it's not clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the problems that I've got and Janet's got, is that quite often you get these KDs and it's not clear what they're really about, and there isn't a report, so then you just don't know what to do about it. There's not enough information to make a decision about it.
I mean, if we were if they were circulated, I mean, can I make a suggestion that first of all they're circulated to all the chairmen, because we have a breadth of understanding across our different remits. I mean, another example is the Royal Brompton Hospital, which, you know, has two aspects. It obviously has a health aspect because it's to do with the hospital, but it also has a big planning SPD aspect because of the threat that they're going to move out of the borough, and it needs planning issues.
Yeah, but what you'll find, I know what you're saying, and there's overlap all over the place in life, but usually, I mean, unless it's a leadership team decision, it usually is pointed to one person who's taking the decision, one lead member. Yeah, and that's
that's true. But one of the things that we might raise in scrutiny is that we don't think that the leadership team is tackling it perhaps in the right way. Yeah, I mean, I think in this instance they probably are. I'm not criticising the current leadership team involvement, but what I am saying is that if it's looked at, maybe it's allocated to one select committee chairman to look at to support you on this. But I think the other chairmen need to see it, and if they feel that they have something to say on that.
Well, everyone gets the forward plan, everyone gets that, and they can look at it. The thing for me of giving it to all the chairmen rather than specifically picking one, it's about ownership, about who has to do something about it. And we've discussed this before, that I just don't feel I am equal to the task of doing all of them.
No. And
so I would like to be able to say that's one for Will, that, you know, so that I don't have to, you know, one day something will happen and I'll let, you know, something will slip up, and, you know, what I'm trying to do is get the chairman to take ownership of the key decisions which they had in the past. So, you know, so I get the ones that the leadership team has made the decision about, but I don't get all the others because I don't think I'm doing a good enough job at the moment, is what I'm saying.
But I think sorry, I'm not being perhaps clear enough. What I'm suggesting, I'm very happy for you to allocate responsibility to one of us to take the lead on it. But I think the other chairs ought to be careful to make sure that they don't feel there's something in their area, because if it's not, they can leave it to the allocated person.
Well, they can read the forward plan. Everyone gets the forward plan.
Yeah, but the point is that if all the chairmen know who it's been allocated to, then if they need to make a comment back in an OSC coordinated way, they can feed their comments through the allocated chairman and make sure that it's included.
I'm not happy about this, because I would like some input from Jackie, because there's several problems with that. The first one is one of ownership, and so I don't have to do them all. The second one is having committee chairman interfering with other, with what's going on in other committees. Accepting there is overlap in lots of areas in life. You know, you are in charge of you know, you do the environment committee. Janet does the family services. If you want to work together, there's nothing to stop you. If you want to read all the KDs coming out, there's nothing to stop you. Jackie, can I have Jackie coming in on this?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. What I would like to suggest is that I continue to work with the colleagues in governance. We've started that work, we've started the research, and I can come back, if you want me to come back to the committee with a proposal and a report about how this could be dealt with, that takes into account the concerns that you've raised. I can do that. So I can bring back a proposal to you. I'd like to have a conversation as well with colleagues about sort of timescales and things. So I understand that you think this needs reviewing now, but if I can come back and confirm when I could report to committee, but I won't leave it too long, if that makes sense.
I'm more than happy with that, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Janet, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I'm very happy that Jackie's reviewing this, because I have a query. I mean, there are statutory requirements for looking at KDs, but there may be another format or another way of doing it. Is this something, Jackie, that you can talk to Sunita about or whatever? Because she sometimes, like, she came up with the idea of a single issue meeting, which was very productive. I mean, are we looking at it in the wrong way, perhaps? Maybe we need an open, another opinion just to see how to deal with it, because I understand MT's frustration.
Yeah, we had that as part of the research. We're looking at what other councils are doing. We will talk to the Centre for Public Scrutiny, Sunita Sharma, as you suggest.
Yes.
You're right, we should talk to other people.
Yeah, she's very helpful. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Councillor Hammond. Greg.
Thanks very much. Yes, I mean, I've been scanning through it, and obviously these things come thick and fast, and a lot of them are quite technical, or they're decisions that have they're quite low level and really don't actually need the scrutiny, or that but then there are some buried in them that really do require some or could benefit from some value added. And I think a way of looking at it, just looking through them at the moment, is to go to the ones at the back of the book and just see which ones are coming up in the distant future are the ones where we might add value, and have a look at them early.
Yeah.
So for example, I mean, just looking through page 43, there's a dementia strategy coming up. Now that's that's a November one, but it's quite a fair way in the future. But that's the sort of thing that could go on an agenda quite early and add value early, rather than try and constantly play catch up with the ones that are coming in today, thick and fast, decisions that are being made this week or last week, and just look a bit further to the future and pick a few and really major on those and try and add value.
I have to say that over the summer, when I got the urgent KDs, which I was just sent, and Adrian, because there was a report and you knew they were coming. I mean, I found those quite easy to deal with because you knew what they were, you knew they were important, you know, they provided you with the information, and it's basically helping people, getting money out to people. But the way they are at the moment with all of them, I just find that there are too many. You see, I've ticked dementia strategy and said, yes, we need. I've been through them and I've decided which ones need looking at. Can I make a suggestion now, Jackie?
Yes, please.
Seeing as we're going, either we can go through them all now and decide, or people can, I don't know whether we should do that, or whether people should, the chairman should go through them, and or the committee, and decide which ones they think need scrutiny.
Are you asking me? Sorry, Chair.
Well, I'm asking. I mean, I've already done it. I've already gone through and ticked the ones that I think need to.
Well, what we can do is either you can give us your list, and we will get more information for the relevant chairs, so they can then make a decision about whether they think that they need more scrutiny. The dementia strategy has actually been to scrutiny.
Yeah.
Councillor Addenbrook's still here. That actually went to scrutiny some time ago. But it might be that Councillor Al-Naji thinks it should come back again because there will have been more work. So it's up to you. If you,
I mean, there were, as I remember, there were quite a few. So then on page 38, I've got residents' involvement strategy, housing management, and that would be, well, that's by the leadership team. But
that would be for housing and communities, I think.
Yeah. Page 37, I've got new council tax reduction, and oh yeah, the planning white paper. Well, we've already done that one, haven't we?
Yeah.
So I've got the Kensington Portobello station. And then on page 32, I've got Grenfell recovery, additional funding for schools for emotional support. I'll just see if I've got any others. On page 49, I've got variation of tenancy agreements. RBKC tenants. That'll be one for Kazim as well.
Yeah, for the housing ones, we can try and get some information about what's been to the Tenant Consultative Committee as well, because the committee might be interested in that.
So does anyone else have any KDs they would like to look at or have scrutiny on? No.
Chair, could I just make a comment on the dementia plan?
Yeah.
So it has been to scrutiny, it has been to the Health and Wellbeing Board as a draft. It is going back to the Health and Wellbeing Board because we've updated it with some sort of COVID highlights throughout the plan. So it's probably available for distribution offline if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be. Probably, okay. Yeah.
I will make sure that's sent to you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans, you had a question. Janet?
I already asked it, thank you. One of Jackie.
So does anyone else have a question about the KDs? No? Okay, well, Jackie is looking into the matter, and we'll see if we can come up with a better system, because I don't think this one is really working as well as it should. So
agreed. I agree 100%.
Okay, Chair, I'll come back to the next meeting with something. It might not be a fully finished project, but as you have raised this as a concern, I will come back with something. Even if it's a summary of what we're doing and what we need to do.
So I would like to thank everyone for their participation this evening, especially our officers and also the chairman of the select committees. I think everyone's put in an awful lot of thought to what they're doing, and let's hope we have a good year ahead of us in terms of scrutiny. So that concludes the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.